You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical.
Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat about a book and a very interesting topic that I pretty much know nothing about. So I am going to turn it over to her so she can introduce herself and let you all know where you can find her online.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Steph. Yes, my name is Dr. Cressida Stone. I'm the author of the book Secrets of Santa Muerte, a guide to the prayers, spells, rituals, and hexes. And you can find me online on Instagram, also on TikTok, and X, as it's nowadays called. And my name there is at Secrets of Santa Muerte. And I am actually an anthropologist. I went to Oxford University, where I studied anthropology for many, many years, did my master's there, did my doctorate there. And I was always interested in the anthropology of religion. I've been involved in spirituality for a very long time. Indeed, since I was a child, experiencing precognitive dreams. I was gifted a tarot set by someone who told me I had a gift as a child. And really, my life has been a long spiritual journey, but it wasn't until I met Santissima Muerte and came into contact with her that just everything suddenly made sense and aligned for me. And I found my true spiritual calling, as it were. So the book Secrets of Santa Muerte is really devoted to her, devoted to Holy Death, as she's sometimes called in English, and also devoted to the many devotees, brujas, witches, curanderas, shamans, female shamans that I met during my journey who have taught me so much and given me such an appreciation for Santissima Muerte and also the Mexican culture.
This is a very new topic for me, interesting topic. Because, of course, I'm familiar in the broad sense, but your book was my first deep dive look into it. Just for me, the only language I speak is English, unfortunately. So a lot of the books written on the topic are in Spanish. So this was the first one that I was like, oh, I can do a little deep dive here, which was very exciting.
Yeah, there are lots of wonderful books in Spanish and a few in English, but from what I understand in English, mine is sort of the most, it's a quite a thick book, as you may have noticed, and it has a lot of detail in it. And so I really wanted to give people a lot of information and make the practice open to the neophyte, but also so that experienced practitioners could perhaps find something new. And as you've seen in my book, there's a prayer for absolutely everything in that book, whether it's enriching yourself, abundance, love spells and love prayers of all different kinds, spells for peace, harmony, protection, stopping gossip, envy, problems perhaps within the family, spells, also prayers for work, which of course is very important, for justice, legal problems, and of course hexes as well, curses, and including some excellent spells that I have to attest work very, very well for dealing, let's just say this, with those nasty people that might deserve a bit of a thwack on the bottom with Santa Muerte's scythe. Let's just put it that way.
Which are always helpful and appreciated. Sometimes that's what the situation calls for.
Exactly. So there are many books, as you said, in Spanish, and which are absolutely wonderful. But unfortunately for English practitioners, that there is not so much. And a lot of people have told me that they found my book very helpful. And indeed, when I was doing the research in Mexico, now there are lots of people, and I want to get it out of the way straight away, that will cry, cultural appropriation. Now, I just want to sort of touch on that from the get-go and just get it out of the way so we can get into a juicy conversation about other aspects of witchcraft and prayer work around Santa Muerte. But there is no cultural appropriation with Santa Muerte. First of all, you need to understand, what does cultural appropriation mean? It means appropriating something from someone else's culture without understanding it, or perhaps, for example, using it as a fashion statement. For example, getting a tattoo of something, a symbol that's very religious, not understanding what it is, taking loads of pictures of it and putting on Instagram, right? That would be cultural appropriation. The second thing about Santísima Muerte, as we need to understand, Santísima Muerte is kind of most holy death, as opposed to Santa Muerte, which is holy death. The second thing we need to understand is that she's a syncretic figure. What does that mean? That means she comes from a blend, a melange of two traditions at the base. I mean, there's lots of other traditions coming into play, but she hails from the colonial era, where she is essentially born from not only indigenous death deities that indigenous people in Mexico were turning to, but also from the notion of the Catholic saint. So she does have both indigenous, pre-Hispanic Mexican ancestry, but also, Spanish. There's a Spanish Catholic element to her. So, she does have that ancestry. And the third thing about this practice is that it's not a closed practice. It is an open practice. Death comes to us all. If you speak to any devotee in Mexico itself, any brujo witch or bruja, female witch, they will tell you death is universal. Anybody can worship death because we will all die. We're all beings towards death, as you might say in philosophical terms. We're all heading towards death. Death is the universal mother, and she does not discriminate. You can be gay, straight, rich, poor, black, white. You can come from any background, have any lifestyle. You could be, a housewife. You could be somebody who's working in illegal enterprises. I've met narcos in Mexico who are devotees, and everybody thinks, that she's a saint just for narcos. This is not true, and maybe we'll get into that later. She is a saint for everybody because everybody dies. So I just want to make that clear from the get-go.
I appreciate that. That is something that I always ask when it's a culture that I'm not familiar with or that's not my own, is whether or not that is open. But I do think that everybody who listens to this podcast would be coming to it from a place of respect. And I think that is one of the most important aspects.
Oh, absolutely. And I think as long as you work with her respectfully and, do your research on her, don't come blindly into this, and venerate her with humility, I don't think you can go wrong. And the beautiful thing about this practice, there are some practices that demand a lot of accoutrements, a lot of paraphernalia. But as I've learned in Mexico, and as I pointed out in my book, the most important thing in this practice is humility, dedication in your veneration. And you don't need to go, you'll need, perhaps you want a Santa Muerte statue to work with her, but some people just work with a printed image. Some people just work, literally, I've had people when they were just started with, the cover of my book as their image of Santa Muerte. And people have told me about all sorts of strange experiences with the book, seeing orbs around it, seeing energy coming from it, things moving around it. That's sort of a tangent there. But you can also paint an image of her. Some people even take, Halloween is coming up, take the figures of skeletons that they find, at the dollar store or wherever, dress them up in a gown and make an effigy of Santa Muerte and use that. So you can start with, very basic materials, and all you really need is a few items for your altar. That would include, of course, water, a candle, and any candle will do. In the book, I give you the different colored candles, which are ideal to work with for specific petitions. But even though, I know a lot of people who just in Mexico work with very simple white candles, or who in the States work with just a tea light. That will work. A basic offering of some food, which we all have in our house, perhaps some booze. Santa Muerte loves her booze. Some people like to give her marijuana. You don't even need to, be smoking blunts yourself. I mean, I met a lovely housewife in Mexico that would just put copious amounts of marijuana on her altar. And she never smoked, but she said she bought it for Santa Muerte because she felt that her Santa Muerte loved it. So, it's really up to you. I mean, I love to put flowers on my altar. I always feel that my Santa loves her roses, but it's kind of up to you what you put on your altar. But as I said, you don't need to spend a lot of money. Just start with basic things that you have around you. And then what is truly important is the devotion, the daily prayer, the humility, the bonding, the talking to Santa Muerte. When you get up in the morning, you should say hello to Santa Muerte because, you respect her. You recognize that she is part of your life.
And when it comes to like working with, creating an altar, understanding, there tends to be a fear around Santa Muerte, it just in general. Do you think that stems from anything that has to do with the saint herself, or is that more just a misunderstanding around the concept of death that lead people to be scared of her?
Oh, what an excellent question. I think that there's two things going on. I think that both the things that you mentioned are relevant. First of all, I think that there have been, terrible depictions of her generally in the media as a narco saint. Now, I would be lying to you if I said that narcos didn't worship her. They do. But there's plenty of narcos that turn to other figures, that turn to, what they call the sort of Mexican Mary, La Virgen de Guadalupe, that, some pray to God. I mean, there's a whole panoply of saints and deities that narcos turn to, but Santa Muerte has been pigeonholed as this narco saint. So there's that, first of all. But I think that stems, this fixation on her, these news stories that I always see about her. I think all of that stems from the media's desire to sensationalize. I think it stems from racism surrounding Mexico and Mexican culture. And I also think it stems from what you mentioned, which is a fear of death in the Western world. In anthropology, in sociology, it's been recognized that most of, Euro America, Canada, the UK, etc., people reside within death fearing or death denying cultures. Death is very much hidden. It's something taboo. Death is the enemy, and in these societies, when someone dies, for example, we believe it very much to be the end. And this is because we reside within, dualistic conceptions, what we could call dualistic epistemologies, if we want to be fancy about it. What does that mean? It means societies in which life and death are the opposite, or light and dark are the opposite. It's societies that live within these kind of oppositions. Now, within Santa Muerte, I've found this to be a non-dualistic faith. And I think that's, not to blow my own horn, but that's where my work differs, because I think that there are a couple of, Euro-American authors who have missed the mark here, who think that people are always turning to Santa Muerte to avoid or delay death. Now, people may do that, but there's also an understanding that death is not something dreadful. Death is not taboo. Death is not to be feared. Death is natural, and life and death are conjoined. You cannot have one without the other. So we often see statues, beautiful statues of Santa Muerte pregnant. And some people have told me, oh, that's a bit macabre, who are from outside of the tradition. And that's because they don't understand that within pre-Hispanic traditions, there was this kind of non-dualism, this understanding that life and death are conjoined, inseparable, and that death is not something to be feared. In fact, I've beautifully met Santa Muerte devotees who have actually petitioned Santa Muerte for death for a loved one. Now, that sounds really strange, and you're thinking, are they hexing their loved one? No. So I met a devotee in Mexico City, and his mother was dying of cancer. And initially, he prayed to Santa Muerte and said, I don't want my mom to die. Please let her live. But, she had lymphatic cancer, which is a terrible form of cancer, which is very rarely cured. And she was just suffering immensely. She was in great pain. So he actually turned to Santa Muerte and he said to her, you are a beautiful, loving mother. I want you to please take my mother, to please let my mother die. Take her tenderly in your bony embrace and take her to the other side. Please give her peace. And literally, within a few days of his prayer to Santa Muerte for that, his mother passed away. And he was so relieved and glad. And instead of seeing death as dreadful, he could see his mother was in the arms, the gentle, caring, sweet arms of Santa Muerte, finally at rest, at peace.
That's such a beautiful story. I think a lot of people will resonate with that, myself included, because sometimes the end is very, very difficult, but more difficult for the living. And sometimes we just do not want to let go, even though that's the best thing for the person.
Absolutely. And in fact, I've met so many through my work, and I'm so grateful to all the people that have reached out to me with their stories. Having written this book, a lot of people write to me, and I'm sorry if I don't always get to all the emails and all the messages, but people have reached out to me with so many beautiful different stories. And I find that most devotees of death had some actual experience of death or a sort of death-like experience in their life. So, for example, people have written to me with terminal illnesses. A very wonderful lady. I don't want to say her name much as I'd like to because I want to honor her privacy. She was dying, and she had to come to terms with that. And she found my book, and it really helped her. She told me to make peace with her own mortality. And I think that because our society is death fearing and death denying, it prevents us a lot of times from doing that. But then a lot of people have also reached out to me, with loved ones dying, or even just facing very scary experiences in their lives, where things have broken down for them, where perhaps they've been harassed, perhaps they've gone through a divorce, perhaps a loved one has gone to prison, perhaps something bad has happened, their business has gone bust, and they've just hit rock bottom. They've hit rock bottom, and it's almost like a death-like space. I think we can all relate. Everybody, I'm sure, listening to this podcast has had a breakup or has had just something so unexpected. And that actually happened to me, and that's how I came to Santa Muerte. I had a terrible sort of near-death experience myself that really shook me up. And I've experienced problems of this ilk. And so, I think we all can fall into spaces of darkness, into chasms, into an abyss where we think, how am I going to get out of this? I'm not the person I thought I was. My life is shattered. And so a lot of people come from that place and they find Santa Muerte. And because she's not just death, she is life. She offers rebirth. She offers strength. She offers a way to rise up anew, to make the best of the situation, and to potentially become somebody else, and to accept whatever it is that you have gone through or your loved one has gone through.
I think of her as a very formidable saint. Would you say that that's correct? Rather than like a soft, maybe like more nurturing energy, it's more of a supportive in a tougher way.
Oh, definitely. She has a formidable energy, but I'd say she's very multifaceted. So because she comes in these different gowns, I would say the pink Santa Muerte, the white Santa Muerte, are very sweet, gentle energies to work with. And indeed, my friend Bruja Yuri Mendez has a chapel in Cancun, which people are free to visit. And that chapel, she's on Facebook. That chapel is called Capilla de la Dulce Madre, and that means literally chapel of the sweet mother. Because Santa Muerte can be very sweet, it is a caring mother, but at the same time, as you said, she is formidable, she is feisty. And people in Mexico have described her to me as una chingona, which is like a badass woman that you do not mess with. And I would definitely say that in her black form, she is very domineering. She is very dominating. Even in her red form, she can be very spicy and, seductive even. And even in her Aztec plumage, etc., she's sort of a trickster figure. So I think that that's why some people fear working with her. And, I don't think that you should, come into the devotion lightly. I was criticized, when my book was being edited by looked at by someone who said to me, well, you're making her sound a little bit scary, maybe you should tone this down. And I said, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I have so much respect for her, and I think that other people should have respect for her too. And I'm not going to tell people to come into this lightly. This is not about me selling books and making her look like some kind of softy figure, because she's not. As you said, she's quite formidable. She can be soft, she can be sweet, she can be loving, but she also has aspects to her. And obviously, death is an extremely powerful force in our universe. Essentially, I would say, the most powerful force, because everything returns to death. So therefore, we should not treat this force lightly, and we should not treat her lightly. Instead, I do feel that there must be reverence and humility. I think, yeah, it depends on people's perspective. But as a practitioner myself, and I'll be honest, an unintentional practitioner, she kind of just came upon my path at a time when I was going through a lot. And I was supposed to be, academic and staying on that path. And I just found that the more I found out about her, the more I worked with devotees of death, that more and more mystical experiences were happening to me. And my worldview was beginning to change. And I felt that, the points of view being offered to me in a Western non-scientific framework were very unsatisfying. And so I think that Santa Muerte brings people, once they learn how to work with her respectfully, incredible peace, a new perspective on life and on death. And again, people have written to me with such beautiful stories. And in fact, someone wrote to me the other day, and he told me that he had been praying regularly to Santa Muerte. He'd found my book through another podcast I did, and started reading it and started praying to Santa Muerte on a regular basis. And he was working in a line of work which was, I believe, quite cutthroat. And there were people trying to do witchcraft on him and all sorts of things. In fact, somebody left something in his house. Somebody came to visit his house and left. After the person had left, he was cleaning up his house, and he found a sort of effigy, a sort of poppet with nails and stuff in it. So he was really worried about that. And so he actually, turned to Santa Muerte for help, took some of the instructions from my book, did a whole ritual, and got rid of the poppet. And she just absolutely protected him so much, and gave him so much peace, that now this person's partner said to them, I've seen you just change. And so they started reading my book, and now they are starting to devote themselves to Santissima Muerte. So yeah, very, very interesting story there, I thought.
What is, and what an interesting way to come to it, and very creepy to find somebody leave something like that in your house. That's terrifying.
Yeah,
So crazy.
it's more common than you think. And in fact, a friend of mine also became a devotee. She asked me to visit her over last summer it was, and her parents, I don't want to say what they were involved in. Her parents were very well to do, but they were involved in a cult, which practiced some very, very dark arts. And her mother said to her, well, I want you to have my house. Her mother was moving. She wanted to downsize with the father into a smaller apartment. And so she gifted my friend this house, which was very generous of her. And my friend moved into the house and she just felt these very dark, heavy energies. Things were just going wrong for her. She couldn't sleep at night. She'd see these kind of demonic faces coming out at her from the walls. And she was just petrified. And eventually, again, she was cleaning the house. And one day she just kept on hearing these kind of crackling noises in the fireplace, which was really strange because there was no fire lit. And so she decided to give the fireplace a really good clean. And when she did that, a brick came loose. And she decided to kind of jiggle it. And as she jiggled it, she pulled it out. And once again, just like in our previous story, there, lo and behold, there was an effigy, a wooden effigy with all sorts of strange symbols on it and just very, very scary looking. So she contacted me about this whole thing, and I was due to visit that area, and she said, I need you to come. I know you've been working with Santa Muerte. Please just come. I need some help with this. And just lots of things have been going wrong in her life. Her husband had turned to just taking a lot of drugs, behaving extremely oddly. And she'd actually fallen in love with somebody else in the meantime, but she was just so afraid to start anything with anybody new because she was trying to leave this, husband that was behaving very badly. And she just had no self-confidence for doing anything. So anyway, long story short, I came to her, and I'm so grateful to the brujas in Mexico. I particularly want to mention Mari. I want to mention Yuri. I want to mention also Soraya as particularly special women to me, who taught me a lot. And my friend Mari had taught me how to cleanse somebody, had taught me how to heal somebody through Santa Muerte. So we did a series of rituals, and it was really scary. On the first night we started, I assembled all these ingredients, herbs, eggs, things to create what we call a fire circle. Luckily, I was traveling with my Santa Muerte effigies. So anyway, the first night we commenced these rituals, I actually had a really bad night's sleep. And my friend told me that she slept well, but I started seeing the demonic faces. And it was like a battle. And in the morning, I woke up with all these scratches on my arms. And I was actually staying in the house, which was, haunted or possessed or had this spell on it, for lack of better words. And I realized that the house as well needed to be cleansed. So we did a whole cleansing of the house. And my friend actually found, and that was creepy, in the attic, there were all these really scary paintings that her parents had of scenes, I mean, for lack of better words, of people being tortured. So I just said to her, we need to get rid of that. Maybe you can't throw it away because it belongs to your parents, but that at least needs to go into the garage, and we need to cleanse that. Anyway, after 3 days of ritual, the house was cleansed, and I went through the house. And for anybody, experiencing this in their house, anything terrible, terrible energy that you're feeling in your house, I want to give you some advice. If you are a devotee of Santa Muerte, that is, you can go through a house with some incense, and just go into every room with your incense, and you can say a simple incantation. And this is the incantation that I have used, and it really works. You can say, this is the house of Santa Muerte. Only Santa Muerte is allowed here. And you might want to add, if you're working with ancestors or any spirit guides, you might want to add that, they are welcome to stay. But you must say, this is the house of Santa Muerte. No other spirit is allowed here. All evil spirits, any evil entity that has been sent here or come to my house must leave now, for otherwise Santa Muerte will punish you immediately. And you can say something, you can add anything you want to that. But I just kept on going around this house saying, this is the house of Santa Muerte, in every single room, in every single cupboard, in every single nook and cranny, even on the front door, even into the garden, and just sweeping the incense everywhere. And that really, really cleared the house. And so anyway, after all these rituals, she stopped seeing the demons. She started sleeping better. Her business started booming. She left the ex-husband successfully and is now in a relationship with somebody else. So I really believe that Santa Muerte is miraculous and can really save people from a lot of darkness.
That's such a fitting story, or great timing, because I just got a question about this on Instagram of a malevolent spirit in somebody's house and how can they get rid of them. So the timing of that could not have been better.
She works in mysterious ways. And it's so ironic, because the Catholic Church is always trying to sort of when they know that someone is a devotee, in Mexico at least, and I've even seen it in the States, they want to exorcise people of the spirit of Santa Muerte. But Santa Muerte is very powerful in herself, and I've seen her used in so many cases to exorcise evil spirits, to expurgate those evil entities, whether it's from a house or even from a person, because people can be easily possessed. And I've met devotees who have told me incredible stories of that. And indeed, a lady that I know in Mexico was telling me that a Santa Muerte brujo witch came to her house again to do a sort of exorcism. And when the exorcism took place, it was so intense that the light bulbs in the house started twinkling on and off. And amazingly, she had called in this brujo because her child was being affected. The spirit seemed to be molesting her child. She had a small boy. The spirit was disturbing his sleep. He was seeing it. The family were hearing it. There were strange noises in the boy's room. He was getting very sick. She had taken her son to the doctor and they couldn't find anything wrong with him. They'd done all the blood tests, etc., etc. So anyway, she was a devotee. She called in this brujo who did this big exorcism, and the lights started twinkling, and specifically in the boy's room, the lights twinkled so much, and eventually a light bulb exploded in his room, glass going everywhere. And then after that, the spirit was gone and the boy was healed, and they never had any other problems again with that. So I really believe she's an excellent entity for chasing away evil and even reversing evil intentions. I talk about that in my book. I don't know whether you remember the section on the black and red Santa Muerte, who is known as reversible Santa Muerte.
Yes.
So reversible Santa Muerte, you can work with a reversible candle, or bond with, create a relationship with the black and red effigy. Now, black is typically used for protection, vengeance, hexing, cursing. Red is usually used for love, lust, but also, you can use that just like black for dominance, for gaining control. So combined, the two colors can be used to reverse anything evil that has been sent to you, and you can just send it back to the person. Because, not everybody wants to do a hex. Some people may feel there are consequences with hexing and cursing, but just by reversing anything, you're literally, it's just a return to sender, right? You're literally just returning anything, any evil that people have sent to you, any evil eye, you just boomerang it back.
Which is my preferred method. As if you put that out in the world, then it deserves to come straight back to you.
Exactly. So yeah, there's just so much choice with her because she comes in so many different colors that we can just work with her in myriad ways, whether it's for healing, as I said, or increasing our psychic abilities, perhaps opening our paths, seeking justice. There's just even, blue Santa Muerte can be used to improve our performance at work, university. I've met students in Mexico who told me that blue Santa Muerte helps them with their homework, which I just thought was lovely. But she can help you, pass a test, whether it's at work or school, etc., or just to focus on writing, that sort of thing.
That is great. Since we are heading into the season that people really associate with death, we're coming up on Samhain, we're coming up on Day of the Dead. Do you have any tips or advice for someone that would be a complete beginner and coming to this, having had no background in Santa Muerte, for them to begin the process and start looking into it, start working with her? Is there something that they could do during the month of October to sort of get their feet wet?
I would say, if you want to start working with her, you need a small altar space. It doesn't need to be, as I said, anything fancy. I've seen devotees literally just take a stool and set up a small altar there, as long as it's in a space, where it's quiet, a place of reverence, not in a busy room, for example, a living room where people are coming and going, that sort of thing. As long as it's in the right space, you can start working with her anywhere. I've even known of devotees who have a portable altar, because of family reasons they can't be open in their devotion, or who keep an altar hidden in their cupboard. And she really doesn't mind that. She's she's often in Spanish called Lady of the Shadows. So if you need to work with her in the shadows, that's absolutely fine. Work within whatever modalities work for you. But I would say a small altar, as I said, an image of her. And as I said earlier, you don't need to buy a statue if you just want to print an image of her that you find appealing from the internet, or even begin with, a skull or something that you believe symbolizes her. This is sufficient. As I said earlier, just a few small offerings, a glass of water, maybe some booze. You can collect some wild flowers. You don't need to buy flowers. You can collect wild flowers, some candy or other food that you've got to hand. Just a small space, and of course a candle, right? You need to have those 4 elements, and of course incense is great if you have it, or tobacco smoke is good, a cigarette, a cigar, anything like that. So as long as you have those four elements, and as I said, prayer is the key, is the cornerstone to this practice. Just praying daily, even if it's just a prayer that you find on the internet, and you can Google Santa Muerte prayers, anything that you believe is fitting. But I would start out, if you're starting with her, I wouldn't ask her for anything in particular. I would just start with a daily prayer to see how you connect with her. And given you mentioned, Halloween, Samhain, Day of the Dead, etc., you can include ancestor worship in this practice. And indeed, people in Mexico often do. They often have a picture of a beloved on their altar. Now, important to note is it shouldn't obviously be bigger than, your Santa Muerte statue or items. You need to put Santa Muerte first. You need to have reverence for her. But I've often found that people have images of their beloved on their altar. Perhaps they create a separate little space for that person, and they put a bit of candy or the person's favorite booze. And you can connect to your beloveds through Santa Muerte. You can ask for messages from the dead. Now, you can use any statue to do that, but if you want to use a very particular one that is designed specifically for that, the bone colored Santa Muerte is ideal for connecting to ancestors, for getting messages. You can even also ask with purple Santa Muerte or even bone colored Santa Muerte to have dreams of them or have them communicate with you through dreams or other signs.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that will be helpful for a lot of people. And thank you for providing your expertise today and telling so many great stories. Before we wrap up, was there anything that we did not touch on that you wanted to mention?
No, I mean, I just think that, my book gives an overview of the practice, but everybody comes to the practice from their unique perspective. And I think that that's what enriches the practice. And there is so much diversity, although, I've outlined basic things that you can work with, candles, the tenets of Santa Muerte, such as the colors. I think it's a tradition or spirituality that really melds itself to each person's ways of working. So say if you're good at tarot, you can integrate that into your practice and leave your tarot deck on your altar and ask Santa Muerte to guide you through that deck. Perhaps light a candle, bless your deck, and use that modality. But let's say you're no good at tarot and you want to use another modality, or say, like I said, you're someone who dreams a lot, you can ask her for that. And I actually detail in the book some herbs that you can use to encourage dreams and lucid dreaming. Some people even like to, and this is not for everybody, as I said, everybody needs to find their niche. Some people even like to use psychedelic substances. So I've detailed some of the psychedelic substances that are used by certain shamans that I met in Mexico, but people have their own preferences. So again, people can work with that. But so for some people, they absolutely would not want to work with that at all. So it's just really up to the individual. What I just want people to think about: what am I good at? How do I connect with the spiritual world? What are my psychic abilities? What would be a good modality for me? I mean, some people even, for example, like to do divination through clouds. They might be good at seeing images in the clouds that guide them. So, find your strengths and ask Santa Muerte to help you become better at that, and to help guide you, and obviously giving her offerings for that through those modalities. I think that is one thing. And the second thing that I just want to quickly touch upon is, repeating that reverence, humility, daily practice, it's just like anything. If you want to be good at, say, writing or dancing or yoga, whatever it is that is your pastime, you can't just go and do it once in a while. This is something that you need to attend to regularly. And it's the same with Santa Muerte, because you have to understand that she's a very powerful force and you need to bond with her. You need to form a relationship with her. It's like any relationship with anyone you have in your life. You need to put time, energy, attention, care into that relationship. You need to have reverence, respect.
All great reminders. And thank you for sharing. And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I wish you a wonderful week.
You too. Thank you. And listeners, I'm going to have everything linked below so you can find the book and check out the things that we've talked about today. If this saint sounds like something that you might like to work with and look more into, especially for the season that we are heading into. And that's everything that I have for this week. I will see you all next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.